Gateway Association of Realtors. You see the background of the HGAR offices in White Plains. That is a virtual background. I've actually not been in the offices for the last 2 months as we observe Governor Cuomo's executive order. As you are all aware, given the information that we've shared as well as the State Association has shared, real estate has been declared an essential service, but with extreme limitations. And there's been a lot of conversation about, well, what can agents do or not do? And I'm going to read verbatim what the current guidance is from New York State. So this is actually from the guidance from the governor's website, which says real estate services shall be conducted remotely for all transactions, including but not limited to title searches, appraisals, permitting, inspections, and the recordation, legal, financial, and other services necessary to complete a transfer of real property, provided, however, that any services or parts therein may be conducted in person only to the extent legally necessary and in accordance with appropriate social distancing and cleaning/disinfecting protocols. And nothing within this provision should be construed to allow brokerage and branch offices to remain open to the general public, i.e. not clients. So that's all we got. And it really has not changed substantially for quite some time. You know, the key, I think, is remote. And the other term that has been used by the governor's office and the Empire State Development Corp is virtual. To do showings virtually where you are not coming in contact with other parties so that you are not spreading the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And I think we can't lose sight of the fact that, you know, the numbers have been improving dramatically in New York State. But it's because of the extreme measures that the governor and the state imposed. When you look around the rest of the country, some of those numbers are actually increasing, even as some of the states are opening up for business in limited phased ways. So I think we have to recognize our first and foremost goal has to be containing COVID-19. But the other good news is the governor is talking about reopening the economy. And he's talking about it in a phased approach in 2 ways. The first way is he's looking at it from a regional standpoint. He's broken the state down into regions, and he's saying that certain parts of the state may be able to reopen more quickly than other parts because they've had less of a effect. The COVID virus has affected them less than other parts of the state. And the other reality is we know that COVID-19 really did a number on New York City and the greater suburban area. But our numbers are improving. The other thing that the governor said, he's going to look at phases in terms of types of industries. And he's indicated that real estate will be in the second phase. The good news is, and I'm going to play a little bit around with my computer to get this chart up for me. He's talked about different types of the criteria that must be met in order to have a region open up. So for example, 14-day decline in hospitalizations or under 15 new hospitalizations, 14-day decline in hospital deaths or fewer than 5 deaths, share of total beds available, share of ICU beds available. So he's got specific categories, there's 7 in total. And the good news for the Mid-Hudson area is as of right now, because these numbers can change, the Mid-Hudson area has actually met 4 of the 7 criteria. We're actually in much better shape than certain other parts of the state. So, you know, there's some silver linings, but I think we have to be cautious and we have to recognize that the governor's current guidance still prevails, that real estate must still be conducted remotely or virtually, and that we should be adhering to the best of our ability to NYSAR's guidance. Now, understand that NYSAR's guidance is just that. It's the State Association's guidance in consultation with attorneys from the state, but they are simply interpreting what that provision is that I just read at the very beginning of the session. They're trying to determine what constitutes remote activities and what constitutes virtual activities. What is certainly not prohibited, clearly, unequivocally, is in-person showings. And I emphasize that because we've had reports that some of our members are engaged in in-person showings. I think that everybody can clearly understand that that would not really be in compliance with the governor's guidance in terms of his executive order. So, I think that we have to hold firm. I think that we have to maintain our priority of maintaining or trying to contain COVID-19. But I think that we also have to start to talk about and prepare for when our market, our area, does have restrictions lifted. I can tell you that Jennifer Stevenson, the president of the New York State Association of Realtors, has written a letter to the governor in preparation for these discussions, where the NYSAR laid out certain common sense steps that they feel should be followed, but that the state should, when the state does allow in-person showings. And again, I think they're very common sense. Agents and their clients should drive in separate cars. There should be a limit to the number of people who are at an in-person showing when in-person showings are allowed. And NYSAR is suggesting that be 2. That face masks be worn. That you follow social distancing. One thing I think that real estate offices can do is you probably should find supplies of safety materials, masks, booties, disinfectant, those types of products are probably going to be necessary when you do have the green light to start to reopen. So start thinking ahead, but understand that right now we are currently still under the governor's executive order, and all showings, all real estate activities must be done remotely or virtually. So wanted to get that out of the way. I'm happy to entertain questions about that after we've talked about what we're really here to talk about today, which is NAR's clear cooperation policy. That policy was adopted by the National Association of Realtors when they met last year in November. And there was a very clear rationale for that policy, which was, let's make sure that the MLS is pro-consumer. But we've actually brought in the chair of the One Key Board of Managers, Leah Caro, to talk about the policy and to address some of the nuances, because the One Key Board of Managers have adopted rules concerning the implementation of that policy. We'll also talk about coming soon, but understand that coming soon, while it does relate in some fashion to the clear cooperation policy, they're still very separate. So we're going to talk a little bit about the differences between the two. And then we're going to answer questions that you may have concerning the clear cooperation policy, as well as the coming soon status. So Leah, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Richard. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As Richard said, back in November, the NAR Board of Directors and its delegate body passed a new mandate called Clear Cooperation, which addresses the, as Richard said, pro-consumer avenue, so that realtors who take listings and advertise their listings must include those listings on the multiple listing service platform. Now, the mandate did go into effect in November with the direction from NAR that it must be adopted, applied, and enforced by May 1st. So here we are, it's May 7th, and in fact, it is in full effect. So what does clear cooperation mean? Well, it means if you've taken a listing and it is not yet in the MLS, it cannot be advertised at all. So let's talk about, what does that mean? What is advertising? Advertising is a yard sign. Advertising is social media. Advertising is a blast to your 5,000 contacts through your constant contact or CRM. All of those, any broadcast of this listing constitutes advertising. And if the listing is not in MLS, you are found in violation of clear cooperation. From the day you begin advertising it, you have 1 business day to have the listing input to the MLS. I think that's very clear. I do want to touch on office exclusives for a moment. Office exclusives are still allowed. They are a viable business model. If you do take an office exclusive, however, and those we assume are not going to ever or it's this time be put into the multiple listing service, you cannot advertise them. Should you advertise an office exclusive, it would then be required to be input to the multiple listing service. It's unequivocal and it's very clear. So it did go into effect May 1st. The fines for violating clear cooperation are $2,500, followed by $100 a day for every day that you fail to input that listing into the multiple listing service. What else can I tell you about that? We are understanding at this time that if you had an office exclusive previous to May 1st and you were advertising it or disseminating that information, that would not now have to be entered into MLS, and that we are getting some clarity on, but that is the position we've taken at this time. I think before I go into coming soon, because I don't, as Richard also explained, coming soon, though it does have some connection to clear cooperation, they are two different topics. So I think before I go on to coming soon, I'm happy to entertain a couple of questions about clear cooperation, if there are any. And Gary, maybe you could tell me?
Not at this time. So
okay, cool. All right, then I am going to move on to coming soon.
So Leah, maybe that we should tell folks if they do want to ask questions, they should use, Gary, the Q&A function of Zoom.
That is correct. Yes, please.
So if you have questions, go ahead and start entering them in the Q&A section of Zoom.
Actually, Gary, before we move on to coming soon, can you display for me, please, the easy compliance checklist?
Certainly.
For listings? I want to make sure everybody is aware of that. Okay. What you're seeing now is the One Key MLS easy compliance checklist that gives, it is not the comprehensive list of rules and regulations. You can also find that on HGAR.com and the MLS. This is a quick bulleted cheat sheet, if you will, of how to make sure that you are compliant with inputting your listings when and what needs to be done. And Gary, can you walk them through a little bit of where exactly this can be found?
When you log into the MLS, it's going to be under in legal forms and documents in the external list on the home page of Matrix.
Very good. Thank you. I think we do have some questions.
One moment.
Certainly.
So the first question is, can a seller open and show a listed home?
Okay, so what I'm going to say is I will field any questions regarding clear cooperation. Richard will be fielding any questions regarding, unless he wants to push those to the end, as he had mentioned, anything about the EO or the executive order or NISAR.
I think we should push those to the end. I think we should handle first clear cooperation, then we'll handle coming soon, then we'll handle our current environment.
Excellent. Okay. Anything connected to clear cooperation?
So it's sort of tied into it. I thought that all fines were suspended for the moment.
All automatic fines are suspended. Auto fines, the system is set up to auto fine. Those have been suspended.
And for clear cooperation, please define office. Is it my local branch office or all the branch locations of my company?
And I'm assuming they're asking, so let me back up. So with clear cooperation, the question has been asked in the past, if I have an office exclusive or in regarding what is advertising, can I share that within my office? And the answer is yes. That would not be, that is, sharing information within an office is not constitute an advertisement. As to whether an office or a company, if it's a multi-office company, I've not heard of any prohibition against sharing it within the company.
And those are all the questions I have at this time.
Okay.
So Leah, can I go back to really the core basis for clear cooperation, which is pro-consumer. And that is really what drove this whole policy. And when you go back to why NAR was considering this in the first place in 2019, it was becoming very common for brokerages to take listings and advertise them as exclusives on their websites and promote to their seller clients that this was somehow in their benefit, to their benefit. And it was becoming more and more prevalent all around the country. And I think that NAR realized that it was really undercutting the value of MLS in terms of a service to consumers. And one of the things that I've discussed recently with some of the articles that I've written about fair housing is the other thing that was happening is that listings were being taken and shared amongst certain groups of brokers, almost private MLSs, if you will, where they'd email the listings amongst 20 or 30 agents or firms and not expose the property to the full marketplace. And that's got fair housing implications because that means that buyers are not having access to all of the available properties in the market. So I think that there are a number of nuances to clear cooperation that really benefit the consumer, but also benefit brokers and their ability to cooperate with each other, which is in itself pro-consumer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rich. I've always argued when I teach the Code of Ethics, when I teach Article 3, which of course is the cooperation article, I'm hard pressed to find very good instances where not sharing listings benefits the seller or any other consumer or any broker. So thank you for that. Okay, coming soon. Up until, and it does tie into clear cooperation, so bear with me on a little bit. I'm going to use the example of you've taken a exclusive listing and its effective date is today, May 7th. I think it's May 7th. And your seller says, I want to get some painting done and I want the flowers to come up and it's been so chilly. Let's wait a couple of weeks before the listing goes on the market. I think this is a scenario we're all pretty familiar with. And you say, great. And you start to advertise that listing on social media, with a yard sign, with a rider that says coming soon, something like that. And nobody is crossing the threshold, not the listing agent, not the listing office. And then on June 1st, when the flowers are up and the paint is dry, the listing would go on to MLS as an active listing and be open for all people to show it. That's the concept of a coming soon. Your MLS has elected to create a status called coming soon. Not every MLS around the country has this. Some do, some don't. So your MLS One Key has elected to create a status called coming soon, which should be ready to use by June 1st. That's the goal. When you take that listing that you've been hired to represent that seller, but it is not ready to be shown, again, by you or anyone in your office or by any other listing or showing agent, you will be able to, up to 14 days before it goes on the market, be able to put that listing into the MLS as a coming soon listing. You will have to have the required fields that are required now on display there, and that coming soon listing will alert your cooperating agents that this property will be coming on the market within the next 2 weeks. Where else will that listing be displayed? It will be displayed through IDX on corporate brokerage sites and on agent IDX sites. And it will be displayed on the One Key MLS public facing site so that the public can see coming soon listings as well. It will not be fed to third-party destination sites, i.e. Zillow, Realtor.com. Any of those. So for 14 days, you can have a coming soon listing on the MLS when this field is up and running that is not being shown. On the 15th day, that listing will automatically turn to active, at which time anyone can get in and show it. If for some reason the 15th day rolls around and the paint's still wet and they're not ready, that seller, you would revert that listing to temporarily off market until a time when the seller says paint's dry, come on in. Okay, so what about right now where that listing status is not yet available and we're hoping to have it up and running in a couple of weeks? Can you now have a yard sign with that coming soon rider? And the answer is no. And this is where it ties into clear cooperation, because though you have an exclusive listing, you are now advertising it. A yard sign, social media, CRM blasts, things like that constitute advertising. And once you advertise that property, it must go on to MLS. So for right now, you cannot advertise coming soon listings. It is a violation of NAR's clear cooperation policy. Now, I think that was pretty clear. We're excited about the new status. It should be up and running shortly. You should be getting your information together when you take a new listing, so that can you take a listing for more than 2 weeks before it goes on? Let's say it's May 7th. I've been hired by a seller. I have an exclusive contract with them, but they think not only will the flowers not be up and the paint not dry, but they also are going to have their walkway redone, and the mason's not available till mid-June. So we're not going to go on till July 1st. And that is now 7 weeks away. That's just fine. Still, nobody shows it. Listing office, listing agent, nobody's crossing that threshold. You are not advertising it as a coming soon listing anywhere, because once you do, it would have to go to MLS. And then on June 15th, you could enter it into the MLS as a coming soon listing. Because remember, you only have 14 days that you can do that. I hope all that didn't confuse you or overwhelm you. I think that's fairly clear. I will say, I'm going to check in with Gary now to see if he has any questions on that and to see if you guys thought that was clear.
So once we have the status of coming soon, we can put up a sign and advertise on social media?
Yes, provided it's on the MLS, because what Clear Cooperation says, and this is why coming soon and Clear Cooperation, though they are separate topics, do have a tie-in. It does, once it's on the MLS as coming soon, it's fulfilling the mandate that NAR has set out, that it must be on MLS. So it's on MLS, it's not on as active, it's on as coming soon. No one is showing it, no one is crossing the threshold. But yes, you can have that yard sign in that rider.
And
Or that social media.
Can I tag on to that, Leah? Because
Sure.
yeah, there are a lot of MLSs around the country and in New York State that obviously have launched their clear cooperation policy, but do not have a coming soon status. And the reason is because there are firms and agents who just don't use coming soon. That's not their market norm. In our market, there have been many agents and many firms, yours as well, because I've seen some of your coming soon advertising in the past. But even when we didn't have that category, you always made it very clear that nobody was going to get in that property. There was no Park Sterling agent that was going to have access to that property, no other cooperating agent until it went active in the MLS.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
So we're codifying that, but we're also recognizing that coming soon is a part of our market, and that's why the Board of Managers felt it was important to have that status.
Certainly. And I want to add that if you have an exclusive listing for your seller and he's not ready to have, or she or they are not ready to have it shown for a couple of weeks, you are not required to put it in as a coming soon listing at all. However, you then cannot advertise it in any way, shape, or form. And if you choose to advertise it, then you would have to input it as a coming soon listing. Okay, I think, I don't want to get the waters too more muddied. So I think clear cooperation has been laid out. Coming soon has been laid out very clearly. And I'll turn to Gary now and see if we have any questions about those.
Certainly. Okay. So what date should we put in the effective date for a coming soon listing, considering
So
the date?
the effective date is the date you have been hired by your seller. I think we're all familiar with clause number 14 on the exclusive, well, clause number 14 on the exclusive agreements provided by HGAR. You may certainly have a different exclusive, where some sort of language that reads like, at owner's request, listing will not be input or shown until June 1st. So you have been hired, you have a valid contract on the effective date with your seller, but the listing is not being shown and it is not being input to MLS. And it is, I cannot stress enough, it is not being shown.
But just for clarification, the listing date for the purposes of the MLS would be that date that you're putting it in to start.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you. So I have a question. I'm clear on the coming soon, but I've been around a long time. So is clear cooperation replacing an open listing, which basically we would normally advertise and not share. In this case, the agent doesn't have an exclusive, but tries to sell the property themselves, or the office tries with a commission agreement signed?
So let me say this about open listings. So HGAR and HGM, or sorry, one key MLS have no jurisdiction over open listings because there's not a written agreement. That being said, I would anticipate that if a agent advertised an open listing, because it is an open listing, consumers and other brokers and agents could go directly to that seller, bypassing that agent altogether. Just as, you know, the open listing is just that. There's no listing agent, so they have no jurisdiction. If I saw an open listing, I could go direct to that seller and sign him up with an exclusive or sell his property to one of my buyers, leaving that open listing agent out in the cold.
How are we going to find out who are the offending agents?
Oh, because when we're not being realtors, we're being private detectives. I joke a lot about that. We all have cars littered with coffee cups on the floor because when we're on stakeout. If we work in the smallest village or in the largest city in our region, these things are never kept secret. Now, first of all, if you see the yard sign, you'll know, and it doesn't appear in the MLS. You know, that's clear cut. Realtors aren't great at keeping secrets. Consumers sniff things out. Other agents sniff things out. We are policing ourselves on this, and then reporting it to the the one key and the HGAR.
And as I always say, I have 13,000 deputies.
Exactly.
So this question, what I think they're trying to say is, if a listing is coming soon and then goes active, what's the date? I think what they're trying to ask is, when did days on market start?
Oh, good. Days on market will begin at the active date.
Great. So the effective date of the ERS is May 7th. I'm confused between the coming soon and active status.
So if Gary hires me to sell his townhouse today, May 7th, the effective date of my exclusive contract will be May 7th. And Gary says, you know what, Leah, I want to get something accomplished in the property, and let's not put it on until May 21st. And I say, okay, let's do that. Gary, I'm going to put it on the MLS as a coming soon listing when that status is available, so that I can start to promote your property, though I won't be showing it, nor will anybody else. And Gary says, okay, that's great. And I gather all my data and I put it on, and I sit down at the MLS and I put the data in the coming soon status. The listing date will be May 7th. On 15 days from now, which would be May 22nd, right? That listing will be automatically turned to active, and the days on market count will begin. Which I also want to just back up. You must have, at the time of putting it in as a coming soon listing, you must have one exterior photo. That will be mandatory. You do not have to have a whole series of photos, but one exterior photo will be required.
And Leah, just as a follow-up, and you may have already said this, so I apologize if you have. It's not as though if you put it in as coming soon, you wait for the 15 days. If you want to activate it as an active listing on day 5, that's your and your client seller's prerogative.
Absolutely. So, right, I could put it in 3 days before it's going to go active. I could put it in, use all 14 days. I don't ever have to put it in as coming soon. It's never going to be required. What it's allowed, the reason your MLS chose to elect to incorporate this new status was because we know people are doing advertising for coming soon. We do not want folks to be in violation of clear cooperation. So we're giving you a vehicle by which you can continue to run coming soon advertising that doesn't then violate NAR's clear cooperation policy.
So tied to that, a question came in. Can someone tell me how coming soon is such a great benefit or advantage to the consumer that so much convoluted muddy water policy is required? In short, how does this benefit the consumer?
Well, I think the consumer might benefit by having exposure to their property in the marketplace, though no one is physically getting inside the property.
So it's causing a stir.
Sure. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, nobody has to do it. But what we wanted to do is, because it is being done and it is a market, it is a business model for some companies and agents. And I don't find it muddy and I don't find it convoluted, frankly. Clear cooperation is quite clear, and the coming soon policy that's been adopted is quite clear.
Okay. So the effective date on the agreement should be within 24 hours that it will be listed in the MLS as a coming soon.
The effective date on the agreement is not the same as the 24 hours is what you will have. Just let me try to explain it. So you take a look today, forget coming soon for a minute. Forget clear cooperation for a minute. Forget all of that. When you take a listing today and your effective date is the day you've sat down with that consumer and they have signed your exclusive right to sell or exclusive agency, your exclusive agreement. That is your effective date. Then they may say, but I don't want to have it on the market till the flowers come up and the paint dries. And under clause 14 or somewhere else or on an addendum, you have language that talks about your seller directing you, though you've been hired, to not input that listing to the multiple listing service or have it shown by any party. Your effective date is the day they hire you. The date you sit in front of the computer and add the listing is the listing date on the MLS.
Gotcha.
That hasn't changed. That has not changed.
Okay. So coming soon, you cannot advertise the listing outside from the MLS until it's active on May 15th. Coming soon, you cannot advertise a property in any way or any way, shape, or form. Coming soon properties cannot be shown at all until it's active on the MLS.
Let's
Not even by
recap
the
a
listing
little.
agent?
Now I'm going to recap a little bit. Right now, you cannot advertise a coming soon listing because it violates clear cooperation policy, and the MLS status coming soon is not up and running yet. When it is up and running and we're shooting for the first week of June, you can advertise your coming soon properties provided they are in the MLS as a coming soon listing, which you can do for up to 2 weeks before it goes live. What you cannot do is advertise a coming soon listing for a month. You cannot have it go beyond those before that 2-week period. You cannot advertise a coming soon listing, and if it is not in the MLS as a coming soon listing.
Great. When will the listing exclusive right agreement need to be uploaded?
At the time the listing goes active is when you will be, right, with Gary? And just like it is now, like it is now, well, now I'm thinking I'd have to pull up the rules, which are this big. So it would be uploaded to the system the same way it is now, right?
It will be, but does it necessarily need to be up at the time that the listing is considered coming soon?
Yeah, I think so, yes. Actually, I think so, because you need to know that you have authority to advertise that listing.
Understood.
Right, so it will be, I had to kind of think that through, and the rules are, a tome. So yes, at the time you input the listing, regardless if you're inputting it as a coming soon or an active, the physical inputting of the listing will be the trigger to upload the exclusive.
Okay. If I take a listing and have it as a coming soon, can I put up a sign? Or when can I put up a sign?
You can put up a sign as soon as you have added it to the MLS as a coming soon listing.
Great. Do we need a rider to allow the preparation time? We have used that in the past.
You mean a rider to the exclusive agreement, I'm assuming? That goes to business, there needs to be something in writing, whether it's a rider, whether it's the number 14 on the under additional points, correct. Whether it's written on the margin of the exclusive, that's really goes to company policy.
Great. If I have a signed listing agreement and the seller has signed the exemption to MLS, Office Exclusive, which allows the property to be shown before it's entered into the MLS, can it be advertised on Instagram or other social media channels?
No, Office Exclusives cannot be advertised. Period.
In any way, shape, or form?
In any way, shape, or form. Not as an office blast to your not as a giant blast to your full CRM, not on social media at all, not on a yard sign, nowhere.
If I have an Office Exclusive, can I share it with my surrounding offices of different companies within my town?
No, which is what Richard had addressed earlier. That is advertising it beyond your company. Look, can you tell the colleagues in your company? Yes, our understanding at least is that that is not advertising it. Sending it to a client that matches their search criteria, matches that listing? No, of course. But group blasts outside the office, things like that are advertising. And to Richard's point, you are really going to get mired in what is potentially a fair housing complaint, a violation of Article 3, office exclusives, which absolutely are legal and viable, have, in my opinion, very limited value to the seller and to the listing office. Well, to the seller for sure, my opinion.
Is coming soon the only phrase that can be used? What about available soon or selling soon or something other?
That's a good question. I believe it's coming. I believe that coming soon, because coming soon will be the MLS status. I believe that's the language that is preferred, but actually I don't have a clear, I don't know.
I would say that since it's going to be called that in terms of status, and that's how it's going to be advertised in terms of IDX, to avoid consumer confusion, you would probably want to use the same language so that everybody understands exactly what you're referring to.
Right. Hey, and folks, I cannot stress enough that don't forget, coming soon will be displaying on the public facing side of this MLS as well as on brokerage sites. Because and the reason we did that, made that decision, was to try to get your clients' eyeballs back to you and take them away from those big third-party destination sites. So when you want to talk to your clients about where to find the most up-to-date listing information, including listings that are not yet on the market but are coming soon, you're going to have to direct them to your brokerage or agent site or the public-facing site of your MLS.
Okay. You still have to allow outside agents to show an office exclusive, though, correct?
Correct. The New York State's strong opinion, more than an opinion, New York State has come out and said years ago that if you have an office exclusive, you cannot prohibit a buyer with a buyer agent from accessing that property. However, you are not, of course, obligated to compensate that buyer's agent.
Can we take appointments for showings during the coming soon time for when it goes live? So there may be a queue.
Sure.
Great. And I think it's been asked and answered. Can office exclusive be disseminated electronically, i.e. to the company's website? An office exclusive to a company website?
No, because that's a advertisement. Unless you're talking about a back of the house intranet. If you're talking about a public facing website, no, it's an advertisement. If it's how your offices communicate with each other, sure.
Can we post a picture of a few agents pricing a house that is not identified? We all do a lot of social media marketing involving getting the house ready for market.
Well, look, because I can't see that example of that photo, it's a little hard to if you're showing, I guess I would have to,
Well, let
it would
me
really depend on what that photo looks like, frankly. If you're showing a picture of the house, I say, yeah, you've gone too far. If you're showing the kitchen sink, I kind of would say, that I would say, here's where you're crossing the line. Hey, folks, here's a picture of a kitchen sink of a listing that we're going to be bringing on in a few weeks. And call us if you want to know more about it. Advertisement. If you say, getting myself, I don't want to say that's gray area, but it is a little bit.
I think it's a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope. I think, look, if everyone's looking for the loophole, then the spirit of clear cooperation is being lost.
Gotcha. So coming soon properties cannot be shown at all until it is active in the MLS.
Correct.
Not even by the listing agent?
Correct.
In other words, can the listing agent show the property anyway once the MLS as a coming soon listing input?
No. And this folks has not, the coming soon status and the clear cooperation mandate aside, this has not changed. This property is either active and available to be shown or it's not, period.
Great. So will coming soons arrive in our client auto email searches just as actives do now?
My understanding is yes. Are you talking about client portals? Yes.
Yes. It'll also appear on the Market Watch as well within Matrix.
Yes.
So if I may turn directions back over to Richard, because he doesn't seem like he's talking enough.
I've chimed in every once in a while.
Can a seller open and show a listed home today during COVID-19?
So if you look at the NISR guidance based upon that statement from the governor's executive order and the guidance about that statement, my answer would be the same as NISR's, no. Showings are to be done remotely. Now, I thought the question was going to be, can a seller sell a FSBO and show a property of their own property? Well, they're not subject to the executive order, though I would not tell them that, quite frankly, because I think that defeats the whole point of the executive order. But if it is listed property, which is what you just asked, Gary, then what NISR is recommending is that showings have to be done remotely or virtually, and that if an agent is going through showing that property via some device, whether it be their smartphone, whether it be their iPad, the seller should not be present in the premises. You do not want to have any person-to-person contact.
So a caveat to that, or a caveat question is, can the owner or landlord show the property themselves?
And again, if it's listed property with a listing agent, the answer would be no. The state is, or the NISR is suggesting that would be in violation or in conflict with the governor's order.
For the agent to show it, but what about the owner? Can the owner show it?
Again, if you are allowing for person-to-person contact, that is problematic. And the agent should not be facilitating that process, because quite frankly, by facilitating that process, which could lead to person-to-person contact between the prospective buyer and the seller, there's a liability there that you do not want to have.
So can you show a vacant listing?
So can you go into a vacant listing and show it virtually or remotely? The answer is yes. Can you have an in-person showing of a vacant property? Quite frankly, the answer would be no, because you're having person-to-person contact.
Okay. Switching gears, regarding interior photography, can my seller client hire and allow a photographer in their property, which I can then post to a listing? Can I be there if social distancing protocol is maintained?
Okay, so the first part of that answer is it depends. Photographers have not been deemed to be essential services. However, we are aware that some photographers throughout the state, including in our area, have gone onto the governor's website and have requested an exemption to be declared an essential service, and they've been granted that exception. So if you were dealing with a photographer who has that email back from the Empire State Development Corp saying, yes, that photographer has been deemed to be essential, they could go into the property. The seller should not be there. And in answer to the second part of the question, the agent should not be there, even if they are practicing social distancing. It should only be the photographer.
So what happens if the seller or landlord is saying that they don't want to show the property?
At this point in time, and I'm going to have Leah chime in on this.
Yep.
The Board of Managers has made a decision that a seller, given the current climate, can indicate that they do not want showings. And as of this point in time, the listing can stay as an active listing. This is a fluid situation. And now we already know that the governor is starting to lay out plans to start to release the economy and that real estate is in the second wave. My strong suspicion is the Board of Managers will revisit that policy as soon as we have clarity as to what agents may be able to do once they are released in that second wave.
Correct. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, you can't say you're going to throw it to me and then answer the question.
I was
So-
allowing you to disagree with me.
Oh, no. So the Board of Managers had a conversation, 6 weeks ago at this point, that said, normally if a property cannot be shown, it has to go to temporarily off market, as you all know. And we thought in the current climate, certainly sellers are able to decline showings during a pandemic, but we would allow them to stay as active listings without going to temporarily off market, even if they couldn't be shown. And yes, Richard, we are meeting regularly and we're very fluid and trying to help accommodate our members.
So virtual tours done by photographers are allowed to be filmed for a listing at this time?
Can you ask that again, Gary? I'm not.
So virtual tours that are done by photographers, professionals, are allowed to be filmed for a listing at this time?
Again, going back to my point that if they've been declared an essential service by the state. So when you actually go onto the website, you explain why you feel that you should be declared an essential service and you should be exempt by the governor's order. And we're aware that certain photographers have been granted that by way of an email in response. So if the photographer has that written email from the state, my answer would be yes. But that does not, photographers as a group have not been declared an essential service. So they would have had to have applied for that exemption and been granted that exception.
Okay. So how does providing a public-facing website benefit the agents? We as agents used to be the best place to get the most accurate info. We set up the clients to receive the MLS data. Why are we giving it now to a consumer directly? Doesn't this undermine our business like the big box brands like Zillow?
I love that question. So here's how I can answer that, is that your MLS, which by the way already has a public-facing website, has created a very robust public-facing website that will drive every consumer that looks at a listing to the listing agent directly. Unlike any of these other third-party destination sites or big box destination sites, as it was just described, where you're there, but so are 3 or 4 other people. And if you want to have a little more prominence, you can pay for the privilege, right? This will be a site that drives traffic to you directly. It does not compete with you. We'll never ask you for money to get the consumer to find you, the listing agent. Also, it will be on brokerage and agents' own websites, the coming soon listings. It will not be at those big box websites, so it gives the advantage back to brokerages, agents, and the MLS. And I think I answered the question.
But I'm going to chime in because I'm going to go back on the history of this. There was an argument, and this goes back probably about 8 years, where there were brokers who said, we don't want an MLS consumer-facing website competing with us. Fast forward about 2 years after those conversations were happening, and guess what happened? These large third-party destination sites got a lot of traction in the marketplace, got a ton of eyeballs, and that's where consumers were going. Brokers were having to then, as you just alluded to, Leah, pay for leads, pay for prominent posting of their listing agent or their firm. And all of a sudden the firms were saying, how did you allow this to happen? Well, the problem is there was a void there. So what we're doing with a consumer-facing website is we're trying to compete in that space for the benefit of the members.
Exactly right. It's really all the decisions that we make are all about what is best for the participants and the subscribers, period. And consumers, but really the agents.
Here's another question. So if the seller leaves the premises with the door unlocked, can the buyer enter the property to see it in person?
So if you look at NYSAR's guidance says that brokers should not facilitate that type of a showing. And I'll give you the reason why. It's twofold in my mind. First off, there is liability there. First off, if something goes missing, who's going to take responsibility for that missing item or items? Secondly, if there is indeed somebody who's asymptomatic with COVID-19 and they're viewing the property, you don't know if they're touching things, you don't know what they're doing. That's, I think, the current environment. I do think that once real estate in phase 2 is released with specific guidelines, and let's just again, revisit what NISAR is recommending, that there be no more than 2 people at a showing besides the agent, that everybody practices social distancing, that face masks are worn, that we'll get there fairly soon, but right now the current guidance is no, brokers should not facilitate that. Now, if a seller and a buyer want to have a discussion as to how that could happen, yes, that can happen. I always recommend, though, if that's going to happen, you probably want to involve the attorneys, because there still is liability there. But one thing that the agent should not be doing in that regard is influencing. You know, if the agent is saying, I really think this buyer is perfect for this property, I really think you should allow this, let me give you their contact information, and they're influencing one buyer over other potential buyers, you got a problem. It's both, you know, again, it's whether that is pro their client is an issue, whether there are any discriminatory issues that could come up where certain people are able to gain access to the property, other people are not. So it's kind of one of those danger Will Robinson things. And the NISAR guidance, I think, is sound on that in that regard. But again, it's NISAR's guidance.
So how can a buyer and seller meet without the agent's intervention?
Well, I would suggest first off that they shouldn't meet because you don't want any person-to-person contact. However, at the same time, you know, if the buyer and seller are insistent, you can't control them, what they are going to do. You can only control what your actions are, what your advice is going to be. Leah, do you want to weigh in on that one?
Oh, no.
Well, so
the executive order is the executive order, and I would never violate the governor's mandates. And I read every day what NISAR recommends.
So here's another question that's very similar. So if we can't facilitate the appointment, how would a client get in? Based on this, we shouldn't even be speaking with someone else's clients to make the appointment?
You can speak to someone else's client with their permission. I mean, you can always speak to, if someone says, hey, you know, forget COVID for a minute. If you're trying to put a transaction together and buyer and seller, and it's not unheard of to have the concept, maybe if we put buyer and seller together to talk it out, it might not hurt. Sometimes it's a good idea, sometimes it's a bad idea, but with everybody's permission and knowledge, you can do that anytime.
And I'm going to piggyback on that because we just had a session for New York City brokers and how deals are happening in New York City, but I'm also aware that similar deals are happening in Hudson Gateway geography, which is going back to the governor's executive order. You have to do real estate remotely or virtually. And buyers have indeed made offers and gone into contract having not physically stepped foot in that property.
Mm-hmm.
Then the attorneys get involved. And is it possible for the attorneys to then somehow provide for the buyer to have access to the property following all safety protocol prior to closing or immediately after closing, whatever the case may be, whatever the attorneys negotiate? That becomes their decision. You know, they then take that responsibility over making sure that they're complying with what their obligations are under the governor's order. Now, there was a provision that I emphasized when I read that guidance concerning real estate. They did talk about certain things that could happen if legally required. So, you know, the attorneys may say, yes, this is legally required in order to move this transaction forward to a closing. But that's when you'd want to have the attorneys who are setting the rules. I'm also aware of a scenario where a walkthrough was set up, where social distancing was going to happen, and it was just going to be the inspector. And lo and behold, it was the inspector and the entire family, and nobody knew that was happening. Well, that's problematic. That should not, you know, the cooperating broker should never have let that happen. Really, the attorneys should have been involved in how that walkthrough would happen safely and making sure that all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted.
Okay. So in this COVID world, a tenant is refusing to have an inspector coming into the house for over 1 month. Can the tenant do this, and for how long?
Neither Lee or I are attorneys, and even if we had an attorney on here, I would say it's the landlord's attorney that would have to field what could and couldn't happen in that scenario. As you know, that there are certain protections in place right now for tenants. And it's a little bit more in this age of COVID-19, that's a little bit more of a complex scenario.
Great. So our questions are all finished at this time, and we are coming up to the top of the hour. Are there any closing remarks you all would like to make?
Gary, I know this session's being recorded, so that if anyone needs more information or wants to rehear or share their information about Clear Cooperation and coming soon, they can do so, but where can they find this session?
So we will post this session on HGAR.com, and we'll also make it available within the different news outlets that we use, like the daily updates, and we'll probably create a webinar section as well.
Super, thank you. Of course, we will be keeping you updated on the coming soon MLS status. We're really excited about that, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, don't advertise your coming soon listings. And really, that's it for me. And I have a hard stop at 3, so I'm going to say thank you to everybody. It was fun.
And I'm just going to say, you know what, we are going to be going to a new normal. And I think there are going to be some silver linings. I think public open houses, you're going to be saying bye-bye to a lot of those public open houses for a long time. It's going to be virtual. We're going to be in a virtual world, but we're going to get through this. I think the market's going to come back very strongly once we have the green light from the governor. Until then, Leah, thank you. Gary, thank you for facilitating.
My pleasure.
Be safe and be well, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.